y'all, Dixie here. Today, I want to talk to you about how I kicked plantar fasciitis. Unfortunately, plantar fasciitis plagues a lot of us hikers and backpackers and thru-hikers and really many athletes for that matter. I had my first run-in with plantar fasciitis back in 2015 when I was thru-hiking the Appalachian Trail. To be fair, that is a 2,000 plus mile trail and my feet were not used to walking consistently over 20 miles a day. In fact, I don't think they had ever walked 20 miles in a day. Not to mention, at the time I was using a pair of trail runners that I had been using for about 700 miles. So any support that ever existed in them, I'm sure, was flattened out at that point. So for those of y'all who have never been unfortunate enough to be plagued with plantar fasciitis, you might be wondering, what the heck is a plantar fascia? The plantar fascia is the band of fibrous tissue that connects your toes to your heel and helps support the arch of your foot. And if you grab your toes and pull them back and then run your hand along the bottom of your foot, like across the arch, you'll feel exactly what I'm talking about. The inflammation of the plantar fascia is plantar fasciitis. If you're wondering what it feels like to have plantar fasciitis, like you think maybe you do, but you're not sure, a lot of people feel it in the heel of their foot, like a pain really in the center of their heel. But for me, I felt it in the band itself, in my arch. And when I would try to go to sleep at night, and I was laying in my tent, I could feel what I can only describe as little lightning storms in my feet. It would just be like little twinges. But I do think most people actually feel it in their heel. I'm really the only one that's ever described it feeling like it felt, that I know. My plantar fasciitis was so bad on the AT that I went from doing over 20 miles a day to crying doing only about 5 miles a day, and that was really pushing myself. I had to take several days off and really figure out what to do, but I knew that rest was absolutely necessary. Thankfully, I was at a point in Pennsylvania where I was near some family and I could go stay with them. On my days off, I rested and elevated my feet as much as possible, rolled them out with a frozen water bottle, massaged them. I took NSAIDs and I got some, obviously, new trail runners and some insoles made specifically for plantar fasciitis. I think all of this helped, especially the rest, but the insoles also were really key for me, I believe. When I got back on trail, I took things slow. I took a lot of breaks, and when I would take a break, I would immediately find a rock or a stump or something to elevate my feet on. I took off my shoes, massaged my arches, rolled them out with my trekking poles, and if I could find a cold spring to soak my feet in, I did that as much as possible. I also made a point to stretch multiple times a day. I would find a tree and put my toe up on it with my other leg behind me, and then bend my knee and lean forward and then swap sides. Thankfully, with doing all that stuff, my plantar fasciitis seemed to fade. For the other two Triple Crown trails, the Pacific Crest Trail and Continental Divide Trail, I continued to wear Dr. Scholl's insoles, and I think I even used the Dr. Scholl's insoles for most of the Florida Trail, and I don't know at what point in my backpacking career I kind of let that go, and it was not really on purpose, but I think I forgot to put them in my shoes one time and I just kind of let it be what it is. I really haven't had any issues since, as long as I especially follow replacing my shoes as I should. I do think that over the years, wearing a wider toe box and a zero or near zero drop type shoe has helped strengthen and given more flexibility to my foot and my calves, and that has certainly played a part in getting rid of my plantar fasciitis in the 11,000 miles that I've walked. But on that note, I want to say that this is the way that I healed my plantar fasciitis without really knowing what I was doing. So I have since learned that plantar fasciitis can often be a symptom of other issues in the chain. So it can be tight calves, it can be tight hips, and having less flexibility in those areas can cause issues down on into your plantar fascia. So it could really be an issue that all of the rolling and massaging on the actual plantar fascia won't fix. There is a video that I watched on another channel that I will link to that does a really good job of explaining the actual mechanics of the foot and the way that the plantar fascia works and why having tight calf muscles or tight hips could actually cause this problem. And it makes a lot of sense when he explains it. So if you're interested in learning, then check that video out. But otherwise, just believe me that it can cause that problem, and I'll tell you how he recommends fixing it. So he shows a really solid calf stretch and says that if you do that stretch and you feel like, okay, yeah, my calves are feeling pretty tight when I do this, well, there you go. It's probably a calf tightness issue. But if you're like, no, I don't really think that my calves are tight, then you're probably dealing with the hip tightness, limited mobility there. So then he has a really good hip stretch for that scenario. Whatever foot is struggling with the plantar fasciitis, so in this instance, it would be my left foot is struggling with the plantar fasciitis. So that would mean my right hip is the one that really has the tightness issue or lack of flexibility or lack of strength. So for this stretch, you're gonna really kick that hip out and then squeeze it as you come back into an upright posture. Let that hip go out and then squeeze. Let that hip go out and squeeze. And of course, it's best if you stretch everything on both sides just to keep it even. But don't be surprised if the opposite hip from the opposite foot that's being plagued with plantar fasciitis is really the root of the issue. In addition to wearing the zero drop shoes, I think doing some yoga. I did a lot of yoga actually while I was pregnant, and trying to keep in shape better while I'm off trail, and stretching, and just trying to take better care of my body instead of going from lying on the couch to out doing a thru hike has certainly played some kind of part in keeping the plantar fasciitis at bay. Just better overall mobility. Sadly, I'm not the only person in my family who has dealt with plantar fasciitis. My sister Montana, while we were on the Camino, pretty early on had some really painful plantar fasciitis, and we took several days off. I tried to show her all of the things that I had done to get rid of it in the past, and it just really wasn't working for her. And in her case, she started off with some zero drop shoes. And while I don't think that zero drop shoes necessarily in and of themselves cause plantar fasciitis, I could see that if she already had tight calves, that having zero drop shoes and asking your chain muscles to further stretch themselves could exacerbate an issue where you're already making the plantar fascia mad. But anyway, she rested for several days and actually ended up having some dry needling done, which seemed to help her out more. She changed into some different shoes and different insoles. She also started stretching regularly, which I think helped, but I wish I had known about specifically the tight calves and the tight hip stretches, because I think that that might have made all the difference. My mom had a bout of plantar fasciitis right before we were set to go out on the Pacific Crest Trail for me to fill in the fire closure areas that I had faced when I thru-hiked the trail. And she just went to the orthopedic doctor and got a cortisone shot in her heel. And she's had no issues since then. She did all of her hiking in zero drop shoes, and I mean, she's just not felt any kind of twinge or anything since then. And while I'm glad that did work for her and it might seem like the easiest fix, it can actually cause collapsing of the arch. So especially if you get it multiple times. So I wouldn't necessarily make that my go-to option. I'd probably try exhausting everything else first. My husband, Rodney, tried that same route of the cortisone shot, and unfortunately, it did not work well for him. So he ended up having to go to physical therapy, got some dry needling done, and guess what else they focused on? Tight calves and tight hips.
Some foot fetish woman's gonna come find you.
So this whole long story to basically say I really think that the key is the stretching out the calves, stretching out the hips. And that's the route I would probably recommend somebody to take if they got plantar fasciitis and they don't want to, you know, throw on some zero drop shoes and hike 11,000 miles to try to get rid of it. So anyway, that is all I have for y'all today. If you have struggled with plantar fasciitis and you beat it, I would love to hear what you think helped you the most in the comments below. Of course, there could always be multiple ways to skin a cat. So I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you found it useful, don't forget to share with a friend, and we will see y'all next time.